I couldn't, in the beginning, I couldn't understand why people would not just solve certain problems that I saw. It's like, yeah, come on. We don't need a government. We don't need anything for certain things, like say within a smaller community. Let's just solve it together. But then it's only after a while I realized, of course, if you have a certain base level of access to education and other privileges, you obviously will understand that. But if you do not have it, you are in a very different situation. And so that's what I refer to as the problem of broadening access. Quite early on when I came to Ghana, and I had no clue on how to solve anything or how this could be changed. But I knew that even if I believe that it will not work out well, at least you have to try. So that's the starting point. So, and as I try, I do not really, deep down, I see certain things and I'm like, this is not going to work out. But what can you do? You can't give up. But as I went through that phase, and then eventually I went out of Ghana back to Europe to do my MBA. And then once I had some distance, I started to, okay, it's not, I mean, sometimes you over romanticize, you now start to think everything is so bad and everything is so great on the other side. And then you also start to see, okay, a lot of the things that I see in Ghana is just human nature. But it's activated because of the circumstances, the stage of development, the access that we spoke about. So it's not necessarily the people, it's the circumstances. So so now with some distance, I'm like, okay, there's something that can be done. And the next thing was, who should take up the responsibility? It is us that have the privileges of access that need to be the first to take up that mantle, to broaden that access, give others opportunities that can solve. So now, as I came back, I still don't have a recipe, so I just started out. But what gives me hope more and more and more is that the more that I go down that path, the more I find relatively like-minded people, but at least people with a similar vision of a prosperous Africa, an Africa that can create its own solution, an Africa that ultimately will not just contribute to a better Africa, but to a better world.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. What about you?
I'm good. Wow. How is you're in Ghana, right?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much for being here, man. The last time I spoke to you, you were in your office on a Sunday.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
You see, that reminded me the days when I used to do that, you know. Yeah. Now I work for myself, and I work practically every day, you know.
Yeah.
I do something every day, you know. I do something on Sunday. Many times I talk to people from all over the world, and many times I talk to people in North America, and the best time I get them is in their evening, which may be midnight for me. So yeah, so it's interesting. We live in a global world.
Yeah, exactly. How long have you been doing the podcast?
Well, I started the podcast 2021, 2 years ago. You know, yeah. This episode is going to be 129 episode.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I talk to people about Africa, we are very diverse in thoughts, in countries, and so this adventure about developing Africa is a huge task, okay, which we need to talk about. Otherwise, one party will be going this way, another party going that way, and that's what I've found. We have been doing for a long time, and unfortunately, we're still not ready to talk about the differences between us. See, unfortunately, many Africans talk as if we are all the same, that our countries are all the same. And until we actually acknowledge that there are some differences, okay, talk about them openly. See, if you want to make progress, we need to talk about the challenges openly for us to find a solution. But if we decide to close our eyes to the differences and think, let's just go on, that those differences will just dissolve in oneness, unfortunately, we are deluding ourselves.
Usually, even on a personal level, I think the first step towards changing something is acknowledgement. It's like,
exactly.
if you do not realize it, it's close to impossible to change. That part is critical.
Yeah. So that's part of what I hope this conversation may be able to start taking us from different areas and bringing us closer and closer and closer. I hope it does. Daniel, thank you very much for me here. So, see, we have been talking, and my guests may not know who you are. So please tell my audience who you are and what you do.
Yes. So my name is Daniel Kwaku Merki. So I'm half Ghanaian, half Swiss. And I was born in Turkey, spent the first 7 years of my life, or 6.5 years, between Guinea-Bissau and Turkey. And then when primary school started, we moved to Switzerland so that I could have a Swiss education.
Okay.
So I would say culturally, I would was predominantly Swiss.
Yeah.
But I think most of my working life actually in Ghana. So basically moved without having a degree, came to Ghana, and just got started in the system. Started from investment banking, got into consulting, had like quite a number of deviations, up, downs, things that went easier than expected. And then afterwards, the system punished me. And that was quite I would say, an unstructured and turbulent career path initially. But then eventually, currently, I would describe myself as an entrepreneur and a change maker. And I would say that I've always been a change maker at heart, even though it might have been in very small settings. And beyond that, I'm an angel investor. And I have a company that's called Boxplay Ventures, which is a venture builder. And basically, the attempt is to systemize that angel investment and contextualize it to the respective localities in Africa to really support those entrepreneurs to build companies. And aside of that, I also still have a daytime gig that finances my personal life. So I'm a consultant, an integrated expert via the German Development Corporation at the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. And there I advise basically on diaspora investments.
Wow. See, this is the magic of Africa, right? See, I started my career in Nigeria, okay, and I used to work for a bank, a global bank, and then I came to the UK, and yes, I go back to the financial sector. I worked there for a while, and within 2 years of coming here, I realized that, hey, Africa is the place to be. You know, I started talking about it, about going back, you know, with my colleagues and friends, and interestingly, many of them have gone back and started something. Now, the things you have been doing, see, in Africa, we have the opportunity to do many things at the same time, and we learn more working in maybe not the formal sector or the big corporations in Africa. We learn more doing that, because when you work in a big corporation, you might be put in a department where you just do one thing all the time.
Yes.
So your profile says that you enable African entrepreneurs to create solutions to Africa's most challenging problems. Okay.
Yes.
What have you found to be Africa's most challenging problems?
I mean, ultimately, the way I look at it is that the major problem, at least from an entrepreneurial perspective, is a lack of access. And when I say lack of access, it's a lack of access to human development, to education, to sanitation, to safe and reliable public transportation, to clean drinking water, to electricity. And I think we live on the continent, we can go on and kind of understand what I mean with that access. Even though you might come from a privileged, let's say, background, but you can still see that clearly access is a problem. And so that's the base premise that I see. And then the second premise is that usually the people that understand the problem the best are the ones that experience it, and therefore they are best positioned to solve those problems. But unfortunately, we do not give them access or sufficient access. So they cannot necessarily solve those problems, because if you do not have access to some base level of education, how do you go out and solve the problem within your community, your nation? So that's kind of my first thinking when I say the most challenging. I also often say the most common, because it's just really like the thinking behind is that access, once we broaden that access, we will now create more problem solvers and eventually more people that can solve the problems, in turn, broader access again, and again, more problem to solve. Yeah. So I'm really looking at it that way, and probably also because I came from Switzerland and I had to go through kind of a mind change, because I couldn't, in the beginning, I couldn't understand why people would not just solve certain problems that I saw. It's like, yeah, come on. We don't need a government. We don't need anything for certain things, like say within a smaller community. Let's just solve it together. But then it's only after a while I realized, of course, if you have a certain base level of access to education and other privileges, you obviously will understand that. But if you do not have it, you are in a very different situation. And so that's what I refer to as the problem of broadening access to so many different things, healthcare, all the ones I mentioned previously.
Wow. So listening to you, it's clear you identify education as a baseline tool we all need to have to enable us to solve or even initiate the solution of any problem?
Yes, I would say for most people. Of course, there's always exceptions, but I would say even with the exceptions, there is some level of education, even if it's not the formal education. But yes, there should be education, and good education is kind of the purpose should be to solve problems, and not to solve problems. If you're sitting in Accra, not to solve problems or learn how people solve problems in New York, but problems that you find within your community. And so that requires, to an extent, of course, applied thinking. So you might not always get that from formal education, but I think it's a combination of that kind of capacity development education that enables you to solve problems.
Yeah. See, why I asked that question is because I personally believe that education, at least to me, at least 12 years, I use the word schooling, okay, for formal education, that we should have every one of us in Africa, in our countries, should have that as a base right. That every one of us, regardless of our economic circumstance, should have that. Okay. See,
yeah.
Because, like you said, if you don't have basic knowledge or education, the problems around you will just be something to you so humongous that you can't do anything about.
Yeah.
You see, and if people have basic education, okay, and they can read and write, they can do anything they want beyond that 12 years of schooling. Once you have a basic standard, after that, you can do anything in the world you want.
100%.
See, I will tell you, if there's anything I would agree that our government should focus on, it should be that 12 years of schooling to ensure that everybody has it. You know? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I said 100% because my personal experience was like coming from Switzerland, and when I got into the system, I got stranded at some points. But at the end of the day, it's exactly my base education gave me possibilities to find ways and means and go different pathways, and then create a pathway for myself, create solutions. And to some extent, it felt natural to do. But then, as I said, it's as you immerse yourself in society, you realize, yeah, you're not smarter than everybody else. You're not better than everybody else. It's like, yeah, you had that access that I didn't have before. And I think as a society overall, it's just beneficial, or I would even say common sense, that the more you broaden access, the more we get people that solve our problems, the more we also get our African geniuses that get the access because they are there.
Yeah, they're there.
Where we are wasting them, because that, like, the ingenuity, the innovation power does not necessarily come from people that are privileged. It's across board, and sometimes certain problems you might even have an advantage to be in situations maybe where you have limited access to privileges, to solutions, and where you need to use your creativity, but you still need that base level, I think, to be able to even broaden that solution that you create and know how to go about it.
Yeah. So the question now is this: how do we ensure that everyone of us, all our children, can have that access? What do you think?
I mean, that's a big question. And personally, I have done some level of simplification in my mind that I know will not stay there forever. But as I was in Ghana and I was struggling myself and I was trying to understand the culture, at some point I told myself, I can't focus on the circumstances. I can't focus on the politics. And of course, to an extent, that's being lucky also being in Ghana, maybe compared to other places. But I'm like, no. All that I have to focus on is what is within the area or the all that I can control. The little that I can control, I focus on that. And then hopefully, if I do well with that, my area of control will eventually enlarge and
fantastic.
To a point where I can influence certain things. And looking at I was in investment banking. We financed large infrastructure projects, private equity deals, but I knew that I would not necessarily have that level of access as an individual. And I would also not understand the system as well. Looking at where I came from, I would maybe have other strengths that I can bring to the table. So it's when I looked at that I was like, okay, entrepreneurs is the other one. It's the bottom-up approach to kind of solve certain problems. And also has a lever where, to an extent, we can create access in pockets. But I think, of course, you want broad access, but sometimes showcases, examples are also very important. So, for instance, yes, as you know, the power of the podcast, for instance, is that we can now freely talk and share our ideas. We can highlight all these points. And of course, Africans can also disagree. It doesn't mean we necessarily have to have the same viewpoints because we are from a large continent.
Yeah.
It is those that is the exposure that needs to go out there. And when you talk about access, I mean, we have that expression of thinking outside of the box. But the older I grow, I was like, yeah, you can't really think outside of the box. You need to enlarge in the box. And that is kind of what the problem sometimes is when you find yourself in a certain confinement, is that, yeah, it's easy to say think outside of the box, but you cannot envision something that you can combine things and everything, but you cannot envision something out of nothing. And my belief from the entrepreneurship side is that it's not necessarily going to be like a systemic change at a goal that creates that access, but that with the new technology, with digitalization, you will have people see in different corners of the continent creating solutions. And it just needs to get to a certain critical mass for people to realize that, yes, we can change our fortunes, we can find our solution. And that is where I see at least for now, I described it before in my brother, but I see my role to kind of create access for as many people as I can around me. And access can be for my employees, try to broaden their horizons, try to show them what is possible, that they can do more than I can do. It doesn't necessarily need to be in my company. But that we have that kind of capabilities. And again, so the big question that you're asking, I would say, I do not know as a silver bullet answer, but I know that the work is to create access where you can individually, and then as a group, as an organization, and create that critical mass.
Very good. See, I like what you said at the end. I do not know. See, many people think saying I do not know. We try to avoid telling people we don't know things. And it's a destructive way of thinking. Thinking you need to know everything. No, we don't need to know everything. See, the more we identify that I do not know this, saves us a lot of time, wasting our energy trying to behave as if we know. One. And two, if you clearly know you don't know something, if you are interested in that thing, then that means you go and learn. Okay. But once you refuse to acknowledge your deficiency in that space, most likely you never open your mind to know. So I like the fact that you clearly said that. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. You are also promoting general purpose technologies. Okay. Please tell my audience about such technologies that you call general purpose technologies. Yeah. What are they?
I mean, general purpose technologies basically are transformation technologies on which others build upon. Mm. And the reason why I find it so important goes back to the access question. And when we use an example, we could maybe use, let's say, electricity. And as electricity came in, immediately, once you have electricity, there, as a general purpose technology, there are so many other technologies that you can now utilize, where you can innovate, where you can basically transform the way we live, be it from how we commute, how we create energy. Almost everything changes once you have that, like one of those general purpose technologies.
Yeah.
And to some extent, we are just behind in those general purpose technologies of a century ago. Because when you say electricity, this is not a general purpose technology.
19th century.
Exactly.
More than 100 years ago.
Exactly. So what I find is important, of course, we are playing catch up in terms of now building up these general purpose technologies. But we should not forget that there's new ones coming. Yeah. And if we forget that we need to build, whether that is artificial intelligence, whether that is blockchain, whatever it is, we need to understand that, yes, the technology is there, but it's, as the word declares, it's a general purpose technology that then enables so many new things to happen. And if you miss the train for the general purpose technologies, you basically cut off the possibilities to create all the other innovations and solutions that can come out of it. Yes. So I think that's the best way how I can describe it, and why I think it's important, because it goes exactly back to where we started, kind of the access one, because electricity is the simplest to say. It's like, yeah, we can talk a lot about education and everything, but if electricity is not there in this day and age, it's a tough one. Yeah. I'm not saying it's impossible. I mean, there's possibilities in terms to a certain level, but then eventually to create solution in this day and age, definitely, it's, as you said, more than 100 years ago. So what's the next technology? And it seems like maybe 100+ years ago, there was some kind of fast advances of technologies coming up, but you can see that we might be at the dawn of something similar. And it would just be a wasted opportunity for us to completely be left behind, because what it does is, if you do not have the general purpose technology, you will need it eventually, and it will be provided by others, and you cannot really, as we said, create the solutions that build upon all of that. And you can also not use those technologies to shape the solutions with those technologies according to your circumstances.
Yeah. See, Daniel, it baffles me why we are struggling with something that have been perfected perfected over 100 years ago. See, without constant electricity, Africa can never industrialize.
Clearly.
See, a lot of I follow several pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, of African Forum. Okay. And they talk about the difficulties in Africa, but very few, I can even say nobody on that forum ever talks about this general purpose technology. Now, early 2000s, the telecom boom came to Africa.
Yeah.
Okay, with the mobile phone. Okay, and since then, think about it. Africa is one of the fastest innovating continents using the mobile phone.
Yeah.
Okay. The telecoms is another general purpose technology. Okay. Now, look at how fast we have come in that space, just because we finally allowed ourselves to have that technology.
Yeah.
If only our countries have focused to make sure electricity is available. Now,
yeah.
I don't know how much urbanization is happening in Ghana, but in Nigeria, a lot of people are moving away from small towns and villages, moving into Lagos and Abuja. And those cities are growing so fast and disrupting so many things. Now, yes, I know urbanization will still happen, even if we have electricity everywhere, but it will be less, because there are so many things that with electricity we could have done in those rural areas, would have expanded our towns, okay, in a manner that development will spread across the country.
Yeah.
Okay. Right now, development is done. It's only within a small spaces, and it's being done in a very disjointed manner, because one thing, we don't have those general purpose technologies, especially electricity.
Especially electricity. And I think, of course, there is a lack of planning as well. I mean, obviously. And I mean, you can use multiple examples. I mean, in the Ghanaian context, for instance, we had the Akosombo Dam, and we were in a lucky position that it produced more than enough electricity. But then how many decades did we wait to add significant power generation capacity? We waited basically until we had an electricity crisis, and then we started to react. And when you're talking about the large cities, I mean, I stayed in Lagos for 3 years. So,
okay. I grew up in Lagos, so.
Okay, great. And then you look at it, that was after my MBA. So I came back from Europe. I'm now in Lagos. And when you think about it, Lagos is 500 kilometers away from Accra.
Okay.
So if you take that back to the European context, I mean, you could have people who just shuttle easily between these two cities.
Exactly.
Or you can live in one
by
city.
train.
By train, no problem. But then you start to look at it and you see 500 kilometers apart. But again, the access, the infrastructure issue starts with the roads.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, you start to think about the urbanization, the fast growing populace. And you look at this, that this is Lagos, Cotonou, Lomé, Accra, 500 kilometers. 4 major cities of the respective countries.
Yeah.
And we are not able to connect them because immediately you solve that problem. A lot is going to happen just by the ingenuity of the people.
Yeah.
And I'm mentioning all those things because I came from the Akosombo example where we did not plan ahead. And now I start to look at some of the smaller cities that are somewhere along these coastal lines. And you can see that some of them, by virtue of their geographic location, are kind of growing.
Yeah.
But nobody is thinking about the infrastructure of these new cities that are growing. So yes, we have the major issues in some of these, in the, let's say, Lagos and everything, but there's new cities popping up that were maybe not even cities 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they are turning into smaller cities, and they will keep growing.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at demography, everything seems to come down. Yes, there's urbanization to the Lagoses and maybe in our case, Accra, but it's an urbanization that these cities are always expanding that will go across that coastline for 500 kilometers.
Yeah.
There's so many problems that you can already see
coming.
Yeah. But there's not much thought, it seems, around that. And to an extent is like, yes, urbanization, we can clearly see the problems that come. But to an extent, it's, despite everything, it could also be an accelerator if done well, because it's an agglomeration of a lot of young people. If you give them the necessary tools, and again, we go back to the general purpose technologies and everything surrounding with it, and the access to education and so on and so forth. But it's sometimes a scary thought when you kind of see that there is not much, let me not say no, not much forward thinking, these kind of things.
Yeah, no plan. You know,
exactly.
See, for me, I think the most crucial thing for the government is education. Okay, see, education, I'll give it to the government, okay, to have that policy and the general policy to enable entrepreneurship to thrive in our society. See, if our government build the enabling environment, okay, entrepreneurs can solve the most difficult problems once the policies are done properly. So the government do not need to be providing certain services that entrepreneurs can do better. Yeah. See, I love seeing those things you say are things you believe in. Many of them I also believe in. All right. So I want us to go through some of them and to hear your thoughts, about them. Now, you said starting small and thinking big. What does that mean to you?
What does it mean to me? I think over time, just from personal experience, I realized that when you don't start small, and sometimes, of course, that could be you have certain funds at your disposal, you kind of create the solution in your head and you do not start from zero. And if you build the foundation wrongly, it's very difficult to change. But when you are forced to really start small, it means that you do not have the means. So you just start in one corner of the problem and you receive feedback. I mean, as an entrepreneur, that could be, yeah, you go out, you get market feedback. People tell you straight into your face because you are starting so small that you are doing so many things yourself. You really experience it versus starting big. Yeah, that issue or that challenge that you look at something, you see the problem, you create a solution that you think is suitable. And for instance, yeah, you can see that with a lot of people in Africa or coming foreigners, but it can also be people that lived outside for a while and have seen the solution and think, yeah, I'm coming back. Simple. This is what we need to do. You build a solution and people are not using it, but it's because you did not fully understand the problem. You didn't got the market feedback. So that's kind of it from an entrepreneurship perspective. The other thing is that if you really set out to solve a challenging problem, it means that it would have been solved. If it's really challenging, there is more to it than you think. So nobody has the answer. So you kind of you start small, and once you start small, you obtain more and more and more insights, and you kind of reduce the degree of uncertainty. And over time, you now get to the answer. And I will use my personal example with the venture builder that I'm creating. So the company is called Boxplay. And so the premise of what we are doing, I'm not saying I know how to solve those problems with these entrepreneurs. What I'm saying is that, yes, there is existing models on how to finance entrepreneurship and innovation, let's say venture capital. They were not created with our system in mind. And the large funding pots are not necessarily sitting with us. So there is an issue there already because one can only invest in something that one understands to an extent, at least.
Yep.
If you say, oh, 70% of a society is unbanked, yes, a foreigner can easily understand that can be understood. But there's many problems that they would not be able to understand. Therefore, they cannot finance or invest. So they determine kind of the problems that get solved.
Yeah.
Because entrepreneurs now tilt towards where they can get investment from or what the problems they know. If I set out to solve this, I can get funding. And it means that to an extent, there is a lack of early stage financing for a particular set of problem and also for a particular set of entrepreneurs. And that is what I want to solve. I want to solve, or I want to create an early stage financing model for the African market. And of course, we always say African, but it still has the contextualization. It has different, I mean, even within countries, if you go to Nigeria, financing an entrepreneur in Lagos is not the same as financing an entrepreneur up north.
Yeah.
But it is, and what I see with that is that I see myself by doing this as an entrepreneur. I see myself as somebody that has to test and create that model and not as somebody who has the answers at the beginning. And so how we do that is take your own money initially, put skin in the game, give it to an entrepreneur, sit there with him, write the contracts, go through it, because yes, go to some authorities, experience what will happen, and build it up from there. And over time, gain one after the other insight. So that is what starting small means in this context. Now, the thinking big part is that, yes, you still have to paint a big vision at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Because what you realize usually is it's hard to go beyond your vision. Because if you do not set the vision big enough and you achieve, it's like that organization kind of naturally deflates because it's the vision, it's the North Star you created for everybody to look at. So for instance, in our case, we want to create a portfolio of companies solving the most challenging problems on the continent. And there is a long path towards even being possible to do that.
Yeah.
But the point is, even if we do not reach fully, there is so many insights so many problems that we have to solve along the way. And that is kind of the thinking that, yes, the vision is really out there. And we insist on that vision. We talk about that vision. We take decisions based on how do we get closer to that vision.
Yeah.
But then day to day, we do the very small things. We sit with the entrepreneurs. We really experience the challenges, the issues, do understand. I mean, a simple example, African entrepreneurs, I find, or Ghanaian entrepreneurs, I see many that are very creative. But then I see many that have quite severe lack of formal business know-how. Even some are educated. So that means that might be different in another market. Maybe there the creativity might be more of a challenge. So, but here, what we need to do is, in that case, we need to bring in a support at an effective cost to kind of take away some of those initial basic burdens, be that accounting, be that legal, and whether we can do it for them, whether we can train them and mentor them to be able to do it, but it just has to be tailored to the local context. So that's in my example, starting small, thinking big.
It's a good do I say idea? Yeah, I totally agree with you. Starting small and do the step by step, and it's important to think big, because like you said, without thinking big, when you're small, if you think small, when you reach that height, you don't know where to go. You don't have something else to push you further. That's very good. That's very good. So you say few can make a difference. Why few?
Why few? I mean, I'm not saying that it should be few.
Yeah, okay.
But rather that you do not need 20 others, you do not need 10 others. In the worst case scenario, you do not need one other to get started. And I mean, at the beginning of when you start to see a problem, you think everybody should see the problem the same way. You start talking, but you don't understand why nobody else sees it. And you start to outline the vision, and you realize that people do not really follow it. But then that is why it's called a vision to some extent. It's because you can see whilst others can't. And when you see that vision and you seem to be the only one that sees it, sometimes you have to go that first, second, and maybe third step. And when you go 3 steps, you might find somebody else that is able to see the vision from step 3 towards the vision.
Yeah.
And then go closer. So that's kind of one side of few can make a difference. And then the other thing is that when you look historically, changes happen. Of course, there will be eventually a critical mass, but the starting point still often is could be one person or a small group of people.
Yeah.
And also in our situation, sometimes it's what do you do when, I'm sure you have experienced that, when you go around and it seems as you're the only one seeing something, you start complaining, and
you are the crazy person.
You're the crazy person. Exactly. But it's when you start, you then see that there is others. It's just that they are far away. Maybe now, if you go far enough, they see. So if you can make a difference is a call for initiative. And it's a call that even if you do not necessarily see how to get there, that you might have to make that start, or you might have to be the first to go.
Yeah. See, when I saw that, and the reason why I ask you the question is that many young Africans see a problem. Just like you said, they expect others to see, and once people don't see it, they abandon them.
Yeah.
And it's the truth of the matter is that life has always been this way. Okay, very few people see a problem until the visionary is able to articulate it to an extent that other people can see it. And like you said, it might happen after 2-3 levels of work, See, let's use Jesus Christ. Okay,
Yes.
Jesus Christ his message didn't explode until his death. Okay, today, the large population of the earth believes in that message. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, and it's important for young Africans to know that, hey, you see a problem and you want to solve it, but people don't see it. Please don't stop. Okay, just do some work. You need to do some work to get it to a level that other people cannot see it. Yeah, that's good one. Yeah, thinking independently. Okay, what's the importance of thinking independently?
I mean, we could probably do a podcast just around thinking independently and speak about it for an hour. And I mean, I see multiple levels of this. I see the level on an individual level. I see it as I also see it from a societal perspective. But ultimately, if I would talk to somebody about it, the first thing is that you cannot necessarily, like, same actions usually will yield similar results.
Yes.
And I think thinking independently is even more important if you would use the individual perspective, if you are not coming from a privileged background, or if you are at the bottom of the pile. And then on a society level, if you are not developed, it becomes even more important because you have more problems to solve. And if you do not create your own solutions, you keep staying behind.
Yeah.
But then as well, today, in this day and age, we live, they say we live in the information age. And it's, how do you process the information you get? I would say it's close to impossible if you do not have, if you're not able to think independently and have at least a set of things that you have reasoned up from the ground up.
Yeah.
And once you have reasoned up from ground up, even if it's just, as I said, a small set, that at least gives you like a guiding principle to go through things and look at it. And when you talk about solving problems, I mentioned before, solving problems for me is all about the insights you obtain. And one example of that is, why do large, well-resourced companies lose out, let's say, in a new technology battle against a company that starts from that one visionary?
Yeah.
That struggles to employ one single software engineer versus the other company is having 10,000s of software engineers. It's because at some level of complexity, people do not see the 0 to 1. And the 0 to 1, in another word, that is where you can think, that's where you are able to start to think independently. And it goes on and on and on. It's like, yeah, we have technology, we have calculators, we have Excel, we have big data. Ultimately, you still need to understand that 1 + 1 is 2.
Yeah.
And then you can move on. And I think a lot of people seem to forget that because probably of the complexity of things, the flow of information. But I also see, especially for Africa, when I compare it to Europe, I see some level of opportunity there. Because what I saw when I came here, what I saw is that, yeah, we call it utility. Of course, water is utility. Electricity is not utility. But even that one, human beings tend to forget that, no, there was a time you should have fetched that water. I mean, it's like Netflix is now utility. You can watch movie on demand. 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And it distorts the thinking of not everyone, but of the masses, because you see the top level, you cannot see the bottom.
Yeah.
And you can't reason again, and you cannot solve problems. And that's one thing that I've seen here, because it's like a lot of people they have fetched water, they have gotten wood, they see things still from the ground up. So when they get an exposure, it usually all of a sudden they can do a lot. But that is how I'm thinking about thinking independently is just a way to navigate the world without being just being a follower that is just reliant on what comes his way. It's like to steer the ship, you need to think independently.
Well, I agree with you. It's very, very important, especially for people who lead.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in the era of social media, it has become more difficult for us to have leaders who think independently, because many of the young leaders grew up and flourish in the era of social media.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, social media information is not thought about independently. Okay. People get the information, what goes viral is what they gravitate towards. And somehow they get into this mindset, and then they run with it. Unfortunately, for me, I think it become apparent to us maybe in another 10 years that we have a lot of leaders who have been running on the wrong information because they never thought about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if we build our countries, our society based on wrong or on unverified information, it will be a bad thing for us. See, I said this. I posted it on my Facebook page today that develop physical and economic development. They hinge on philosophical foundation. Okay, and the question is for me is this: what are the philosophical foundations that we in Africa are building our society on?
That's a huge question.
Okay.
But I think there's probably one of the problems we have is like there is a severe disconnect between our roots, our actual culture, how we live, and then where we are going in some of the things.
Good.
And I mean, and sometimes that can be a dicey topic when you go into religion, for instance.
Yeah.
But what I see, for instance, is that let's use Christianity as an example. But when you look into, let's say, the European context, let's say, because I grew up in Europe, so maybe that's the one I can easily speak about. But you can see that probably to some extent you could make the case, of course, that the importance of religion has been reducing.
Yeah.
On the other side, people might no longer read the Bible, but their foremost thinkers were readers of the Bible. So when you read the books, when you see the foundation, when you see what the society was built upon, it is the ultimate driver of that society, of the prosperity.
That's it.
And their problem will come when they deviate too far from it.
From it. Exactly.
Exactly.
I'm happy you get this.
Yeah, but there was that foundation. And sometimes, as I'm saying, when you talk about religion, you don't even need to argue who believes in what. Ultimately, these things are tested over time. There is a reason why the society that had that book as its fundamental book did well.
Yeah.
So that is all right, but you cannot take something like, you cannot just take a book and not live the principles or have it embedded and think that it can yield the same result.
That's it. Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. There with these, like the philosophical foundations of the society. And again, it's not about the right or the wrong. It's about alignment, that it has to.
Very good.
It has to match.
Very good.
Yeah.
See, this is, I'm smiling because, see, these are the things when I talk to my friends privately, these are the things we talk about. See, unfortunately, we cannot build a sustainable Africa without our countries, our society, if we don't agree on some fundamental principles. Okay, we cannot. See, yeah. And I will tell you, the old, let me use the word the big boys, Europe, America, China, India, even Japan, have their societies have in the West is Christianity. Okay, yeah, the West is the Christianity. In China, they have their own traditional whatever. Okay, that's what is driving the country right now. Okay, India, they had many centuries, millennia of working on a fundamental foundation. Okay, yeah. Maybe based on Hinduism. Okay, I don't know exactly, but they do have foundation. Okay, now unfortunately, Africa is very diverse. See, this is what I tell people, and they don't seem to want to acknowledge how that affects what we do and where we'll go. Okay, we're diverse. We have, see, some people think that we all have the same traditions. No, we don't.
Yeah.
Okay, no, we don't. We have thousands of different traditions.
Yeah.
So if we want to be called Africa, okay, a unified group, we need to sit down, talk about our different traditions, cultures, and maybe agree, okay, we have all this, let's keep it in our little enclaves, but as a group, we need to adopt this.
Yeah.
Okay. We have this in our small villages. Okay. Yes, we keep it, but as a group, this is what we go by. Until we do that, we will struggle. Anyway, you know, I think about this all the time. So, yeah, you mentioned that our diversity. Okay, now you think about diversity of thought, ideas, and meritocracy. Please explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I put it out there like that is because of how people view diversity oftentimes these days. And I don't think diversity, like the skin color, should be your first marker. Of course, there can be some shared experiences based on your skin color, but I would argue that a white guy growing up in Ghana and a black guy growing up in the UK, they will have, like, of course, the white guy in Ghana will have more similar experiences with the Ghanaians than with the people living in let's say, in London, because it's like the same police you encounter, it's the same corruption, it's the same prices. It's natural that you will have some things that you are more aligned with the people that within your environment.
Yes.
And the danger I see, or what I'm even have experienced myself, is that there is almost like an expectation of what you should think based on your skin color or based on being African.
Yeah.
And yes, some people will say, oh, but that might not be an issue. But I think it's a huge issue, because we exactly, again, need the insights to determine what are the best solutions that we have. And that is where the idea meritocracy thing comes in for me. And when you say diversity, yes, in the right way, I believe in diversity, but it does not mean that you just pick people based on external markers. It means that, I mean, we can say it in an entrepreneurship context. Yes, you would not want a company, unless in extreme circumstances, but usually you would not want a company of 50 hardcore engineers.
Yeah.
You need some differing viewpoints. And of course, a female can bring different viewpoints than, let's say, even if it's an engineer, but that female can bring in a different viewpoint. But it's not a sole marker. It should really be based on the actual ideas. And I think, most importantly, on people being able to voice their actual ideas. And that is kind of where that danger comes in. When you say, yes, diversity, but then you realize diversity is now in groups, and within the group, you are supposed to have a certain mindset. A certain thought. And it's funny enough, it's exactly the opposite of diversity. If you now tell me that I should think like that, it's like, where is the diversity? The actual diversity. Yes, I even left it out because ultimately, that's what it should be. And the other thing that I witnessed, and I mean, I saw that when I went back to Europe. I was in Berlin 2018 to 2019. And I saw that diversity is now often being used by people to position themselves at certain positions of access, basically. And it's the most privileged of people of that particular group that is positioning themselves and saying, yeah, diversity. But diversity, and now you are in a leadership position. I mean, I'm not saying that representation is important.
Yeah.
But there should definitely be more to it. Diversity should be to, even if you want females in your company, which, for instance, I definitely want, but I want the best possible females that I can find.
Competent people.
Competent people overall. And in my philosophy, I know females are as competent as men. So if I can only find competent men, then there is either something wrong with my approach or with the society around, and I need to do an extra effort to find these females maybe earlier on, do programs, go closer to schools, and do that. So diversity, real diversity, is not an easy thing. And I think it goes back to what you're saying. Of course, like with the Africans, of course, number one, you need certain founding principles.
Yeah.
If you cannot agree on the founding principles, it's not going
nothing will happen. Yeah.
Exactly. If you go beyond the founding principles, then yes, once we have those ones, we want the best possible people there. And yes, we want representation. But it's not that if no Black guy is there, we now need to pick 2 Black guys and put them there. If no Black guy can get there, it means that they do not have access. For instance, fix the access.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't fix the problem just at the top level. Do the extra work of finding these people in these groups that have the capacity and invest, give them the resources, upskill them, and then let them be there. Because you are not doing a service, because now you have a female that is not as capable as the, let's say, in a room of 8, she's not as capable as the 7 guys.
Yeah.
And it's not because she's a female, it's because you picked her when she wasn't ready for it, or when she did not have had the access. Yeah. And that's why I put it out there. It's, to an extent, I would say it's more of even a counter stance than necessarily something that I would have said is my first thought of how to go about it. I thought it is natural. My thing is like, I'm looking for the best possible people. I'm looking for alignment of principles, alignment of value. And I understand that sometimes you have the luck of finding somebody with a very similar vision, but oftentimes it's just that you can travel together for a while, because my vision, you joining me on my vision, brings you closer to eventually yours, which is also fine. So I wouldn't have even looked much at diversity per se, but because there is that counter of trying to push one into certain corners, positions, that's why I find it important to state that, diversity of an idea meritocracy.
Yeah. See, you are very right. And we haven't done a good job of raising people from the bottom. Okay. See, for example, I don't know how many tribes you have in Ghana, but in Nigeria, we have over 300. Okay. And Nigerian economy for a long time had the government government parasitas as the biggest employers of labor. Okay. And unfortunately, government work, we have something in Nigeria we call what's it called again? National, oh my God, I can't remember what it's called. Well, whereby at senior levels, you want somebody who always want people from each of those major tribes. Now, unfortunately, because of that policy, we have raised certain people who were not qualified to leadership position. And what happens? What happens when that happens? What that causes the decline of the company or the processor, because we don't have capable leadership. And then there's a lot of where people are not happy because they can see somebody who is not qualified leading them. See, thankfully, in Nigeria, the private sector is surpassing government employment, and in the private sector, the market defines who gets the job, because hey, if I use affirmative action to hire in my company, I'm only killing my company. So yeah, so it's important that if we want our countries to rise up, we need meritocracy as a foundation. Yeah, exactly. To hire. Yeah. And if we really want tribal diversity in every of our companies, then like we talked about at the beginning, we need to put in place the policy of education. Okay. Exactly. At the beginning. At least at every tribe or whatever region, the youths are educated to the standard, Yeah. So
yeah. And I think sometimes it seems to me, it feels like some people, they are not willing to put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, just today, with Boxplay, my company, we released 5-year master plan. So that's a 2023 to 2027 master plan. And that master plan has 4 major milestones. The 4th milestone is that we will launch a fund to invest into startup, into ventures. And with that fund, for instance, we put out there that we would want to invest into a minimum of 30% of startups with female founders.
Okay.
Now, number one is, to an extent, there you're already starting to put your money a bit where your mouth is. It would be a disadvantage if we now just wait and in 2027 we have that fund and we by force now have to invest into 30% companies with female leadership. What it means is that today we have to put in an effort to start hiring females, the best possible, the competent females, treat them well, give them opportunities to grow. They might leave the company, but those are the people that will speak well about us. We will get more good people when we do programs. And let's say we do a capacity building program for entrepreneurs with 50 entrepreneurs. Okay, can we get 50% female, or can we at least get the 30%? And can we ensure that we put in the necessary effort to get the best possible females to be there? And over that 5-year or 3-year, 4-year period, it builds up for us to have a competitive advantage of pool of capable females.
Yeah.
But if we just stand there and say, I mean, you're just burning investor money. If you're just saying, because what is the reasoning behind it? You want to invest in the best. So if you say you want 30% females, you need to start at the beginning.
At the beginning.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this. You also believe that Africa is the future, and you say for better or worse. Okay, so see, and you talked about vision alignment. So I want to link this with one question I ask people. I ask them, what is your vision for Africa in 30 years? Okay, so tell us why or how you believe that Africa is the future.
How? As you said, I state for better or worse.
Yes, for better or worse. In fact, I want you to talk about that.
Yes. So for me, it's an urgency. It's like a call to urgent action.
Yeah.
And the truth is that when I started thinking about this, we have a lot of problems. People do not have access. We need to change something. That's quite early on when I came to Ghana.
Yeah.
And I had no clue on how to solve anything or how this could be changed. But I knew that even if I believe that it will not work out well, at least you have to try. So that's the starting point. So, and as I try, I do not really, deep down, I see certain things and I'm like, this is not going to work out. But what can you do? You can't give up. But as as I went through that phase, and then eventually I went out of Ghana back to Europe to do my MBA. And then once I had some distance, I started to, okay, it's not, I mean, sometimes you over romanticize, you now start to think everything is so bad and everything is so great on the other side. And then you also start to see, okay, a lot of the things that I see in Ghana is just human nature. But it's unrelated because of the circumstances, the stage of development, the access that we spoke about. So it's not necessarily the people, it's the circumstances. So yes. So now with some distance, I'm like, okay, there's something that can be done. And the next thing was, who should take up the responsibility? It is us that have the privileges of access that need to be the first to take up that mantle, to broaden that access, give others opportunities that can solve. So now, as I came back, I still don't have a recipe. So I just started out. But what gives me hope more and more and more is that the more that I go down that path, the more I find relatively like-minded people, but at least people with a similar vision of a prosperous Africa, an Africa that can create its own solution, an Africa that ultimately will not just contribute to a better Africa, but to a better world. The more you go, the more you see, oh, the people are out there, and these people are brilliant as anywhere else in the world, if not more, because of the circumstances, because it forces you to almost do everything. You can't just be an expert. You might be an engineer, but if you want to succeed in Africa, you must be a storyteller, you must be a lawyer, you must do everything to an extent to get there. So you see that kind of thing. So my vision, especially when you say for 30 years, it's kind of a difficult one, because I see that I have hope, a lot of hope, or even more than hope. But I probably think we are probably talking about an 80-year time span or something of that sort. But if we do not apply that urgency now, then even that 80 years, it's not going to happen. So the vision for me is really just that through technology, through increased platforms and telling the stories of ourselves, that these people that to an extent are non-systemic, because our system is not producing the problem solvers, that these non-systematic problem solvers eventually create the platforms where they are being heard, create companies where people can see that it works, and where they can make the difference, and it's just being a matter of critical mass. So that's how I'm looking at it. But again, as I told you earlier, I'm trying to look at it from where I'm standing now. Of course, I understand the leadership components, the political components and everything, but I cannot envision it. I don't know what is the lever. I don't know how and when, maybe somewhere.
Okay, so look at it this way. Yes, it's difficult to envision it, but what do you want to see?
What I want to see, I mean, simply put, I mean, you mentioned education, so it's really like that human capacity development at the core. And by you putting that at the core, there's a lot of other things. It's not just the formal. It's like once you put education at the core, people would want to understand the environment. People would want to understand their history. People would want to breathe clean air. People would want to be healthier. And so it's really just surrounding that, driving education, broaden it first and foremost. But I think once you broaden, naturally,
everything happens.
There will be people that rise to the top. So it's really is that building out, at least number one, like, yes, the base education, and I think number two, building kind of an understanding of what it means to be Ghanaian, or what it means to be African, maybe in the larger context. I think that's kind of
Okay. Okay. That's good. See, I love reading. Okay, see, by now I love reading. See, and I encourage people to read. Unfortunately, we as a society, we don't read. A few months ago, I commented on a video on Facebook by a lady talking about our colonial masters. He didn't want us to read certain books and all that. And I said, hey, okay, that happened now, but today we have the opportunity to read anything we want. So I encourage everybody to just pick up books and read. I got lambasted by over 100 people that why am I asking us to go and read things that are colonizers wrote, blah 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 blah. Okay, but the point is, my point is this: if we want to be equal to our colonizers, at least let's know what our colonizers know. Okay, so let us read the books that they read, at least. Yeah. So if you want to be equal to them, then read the books they read. Then we can also read the books they don't read, right? So ultimately, let's read. So my brother, say please recommend 5 books to my audience.
5 books. Okay.
Yes.
I'll struggle, but I'll try to keep it to 5. I mean, before the recommendation, I mean, for me, I think it's important that you do not just read things you agree with. It's important to broaden your perspectives. And as you now know, I'm into entrepreneurship. So from the entrepreneurship angle, there's 2 books that come to mind that I would recommend.
Okay.
So the book, we somehow mentioned the title in the conversation, not because of the book, but 0 to 1 from Peter Thiel.
Okay, 0 to 1.
Yes, that's number 1. And there is a thesis by Oliver Samwer and Max Finger, and it's America's most successful startups. And
okay.
It's like, I think that's number 2, because it's just like a clear-cut, very dry recipe of just analyzing these 100 startups and what leads to success, what does not. That's for entrepreneurship. For a manager, what I would recommend is, and there's a bias because I read it quite early when I was young, but it's the Peters Principle.
Okay, what was again?
The Peters Principle.
Okay.
Yeah. And then From Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Okay.
That's another management. And then I love as well, I love to some level novels, sort of like adventure novels and explorer stories. So I will give one explorer story, and that's Aku Aku by Thor Heyerdahl.
Yeah. Okay. Good. See, I when I was young, I read 90% fiction books.
Yeah.
But in the last 10 years, I've only read non-fiction books.
Yeah.
You know,
the same tendency.
Yeah. All right. See, Daniel, I'm happy to have you on the podcast today. We have talked about so many interesting things. So my last question for you is, what's your advice to young Africans to help them contribute to their communities?
I would say they should seek exposure, and I know many do that. But then even more important than seeking exposure is to understand your roots and understand the context you find yourself. And I think earlier on in the conversation, I mentioned that sometimes when I hear that expression, think outside of the box, I'm starting to think, yeah, you might not have to think, it might not be possible, technically speaking, what you have to enlarge in the box.
Okay.
And I think when you seek exposure, you enlarge in that box. And I think that's quite easily understandable. And I think many people get that. Like, yeah, you grew up in Ghana, you've never been out of Ghana, you travel to, whether it's US, China, Switzerland, whatever it is, you see new things. Of course, it enlarges your box. And I think people kind of intuitively would understand that.
Okay.
But I think the other thing that enlarges the box in a different way is to understand your roots, because it helps you to put things into context when you go further. It's like, I mean, I'm going back to our conversation. That's the advice on a personal level. But when you think about what we spoke, founding principles.
Yeah.
As a united Africa or as a nation, the founding principle is similar to what we say, understand your roots.
Yeah.
And when you understand your roots, create a set of values around it.
Yeah.
And that also, it helps to anchor the way you see the world, and helps you to categorize things as you seek that exposure.
Yeah.
So that is why the second one is like kind of counterintuitive compared to the first one. That's why I'm putting a bit more emphasis. It's to understand your roots and the context you come from, because ultimately that is your key differentiating factor. It is a value. It is like, yes, you understand the others, you seek the exposure, you read the foreign books, but then eventually you still come back and think and understand where you came from.
Yeah. Yeah. See, my father studied history, and when I was a teenager, he was teaching history, A-levels, but he went ahead to work in the biggest corporation in Nigeria. He left teaching and all that. So I've been telling him for years to write a history book about us, about his mother. See, I've hounded him for years. Finally, he's done that. So that book is going to be launched next month, and a few people have been talking about it in a manner that makes me happy. See, he wrote a book about my roots. See, and what I tell young people, because history has become a big deal, okay, on social media especially, and many of the things that young Africans focus on, unfortunately, are mostly myth, okay? And I tell them, see, okay, let's go back a little bit. Go back, talk to your father, your mother, your grandparents, ask them to tell you their history, their own history.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if your grandparents or your parents tell you their history, their own history, and then check that history, compare it to what you are hearing on social media, you see the difference. See, it's important for us to actually understand where we come from. See, it creates a big difference in the way we see the world.
Yes.
Once you understand your personal family history, so thank you very much, Daniel. It's been a fantastic time with you today. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks for having me.
Take care, man. Bye. Yeah.
Right.